So I noticed that it was much more important to them what their peers thought than what I thought, which is what the whole point is anyway.
Hi there, I am Monica Burns, and welcome to the new Easy EdTech podcast episode. As a former New York City public school teacher and current EdTech consultant, I started this podcast in 2019 to share my favorite classroom tech integration tips and stories from my experiences. Each episode offers practical ideas for you to try, share, or save for later. Be sure to check out classtechtips.com/podcast for today's show notes and resources. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or another favorite podcast app, you'll find the show notes link in the description too. A big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, Britannica Professional Learning. They're dedicated to growing and retaining exceptional educators by providing tailored professional learning solutions that help both educators and students thrive. With a focus on activating, enhancing, and growth, Britannica Professional Learning offers customized professional development that supports teachers in building product knowledge, enhancing pedagogical expertise, and driving student growth. Elevate your teaching practices and empower your students by visiting www.britannicaeducation.com and discover how they can help you transform your classroom. This week's episode is titled A Deep Dive into Peer Learning and Student Video Creation with Kristen Brooks. Kristen and I have known each other for several years, and when she sent out a tweet this spring about a peer learning experience her students were taking part in, I knew I had to reach out to her. She agreed to come on the podcast, share her expertise, and give you a few ideas for exploring peer learning and video creation this year. Let's jump into the conversation with Kristen. Welcome, Kristen, to the podcast. I am just so excited to chat with you today. But before we jump into all things peer learning and video creation, what is your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Hey, Monica, it's so good to be on your podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just super honored to be here. And it's interesting and cool to me to think of I'm like going to be a guest on something that I actually listen to. So that's really fun for me. I am Kristen Brooks, and I am a technology teacher. Some people call it technology specialist. Basically, I work at Indian Knoll Elementary School, and I work with kindergarten through fifth graders. Every day, I see 850 students a week, and I'm part of the specials program or connections. So I teach technology, all kinds of technology, and it's really fun. And I see them usually about once a week.
Well, I am just so excited to hear from your experience, your expertise, all the different students that you reach throughout your week, right throughout the school year. And today we're talking about a topic. I saw you, we've known each other for a while now, but I saw you tweet about this. And then I reached out to say, can we chat a little bit about this idea of peer learning? So can you tell us, what is peer learning? How does it differ from traditional classroom learning experiences? And where did you even learn about this topic?
Okay, well, peer learning is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I feel like it's super successful. And I know that a lot of folks that I have spoken to about this in the past, they're like, well, that will only work for you because you teach all the different grade levels. And really, that's not the case. Anybody could do peer learning. And for me, I learned it when I student taught. So almost 29 years ago. And I student taught in Carrollton City Schools out at West Georgia University. And just really, when I got there, they said, we've actually placed you into something that is brand new at our school. It's called Kid Mix. And Kid Mix was where it was a group of parents that had to agree that they wanted their child to be in this learning atmosphere where the kindergarteners started with the teacher, and then they looped up to first grade the next year with the same teacher. So the classroom was made of half kindergartners and half first graders. And I was like, absolutely. I'm always in for doing something new and exciting. And, the first few weeks of student teaching, you're observing and taking notes anyway. So it's just a really amazing experience to be observing something that I had never seen done in education before. And it was so successful that I was like, I want to do this when I start teaching. And so really from that experience and seeing how successful it was and how much further I felt like her first graders were compared to the traditional first grade classes, because they had been with the same teacher for 2 years, plus they knew a lot of the same students. And the first year when they're in kindergartner, they're more of the younger learners, what she would refer to them as younger learner, older learner. And then they were looping up. So then they became the older learner. And just to see their self-esteem grow and have the ability to basically mentor the other students was just an amazing time. And then the students who were the mentorees just really loved learning from other kids, and not always from their teacher. So it's not like she just sat around and did nothing, but it was really a great experience. So I brought that into my class when I was a homeroom teacher in first and second grades. We had different things like book buddies, math groups that we would work with older grade levels. So a lot of people know that for peer learning, where you have older students that come in and just read with them or do math with them, or sometimes just play games with them, just, pure mentoring type situation where they just talk about regular things. But in my tech lab, I really felt like it would be successful to first I had to teach my students peer to peer and how to really give each other feedback. So there's definitely some policies and procedures that are in the mix. But then once they learn that, you can really encourage them to even go just a grade lower or 2 grades lower or whatever they want to do. They really, it's just amazing that they can take on that role. And really, it means much more to them for them to be able to share with other students versus just sharing with me or sharing with students that they don't know at another school, because we do that as well. So that's basically it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And, as you were talking, Kristen, I was thinking about the strategies that you must use to keep everyone engaged and interested. And I would imagine students are just generally excited that there's someone new in their room, right, in their classroom that's not part of the 30 or so kids that they are with all the time. So are there certain things you do? How do you ensure that all students actively participate in this peer learning process? Are there some special strategies used to encourage collaboration and engagement, especially when kids may not know each other, right, in this environment?
Yes, we do a lot with Microsoft Flip. We actually have found that is a great tool because of scheduling issues. Now, everything is scheduled so much more scheduling involved in school than when I started a while ago. It's not as easy to get the book buddies or the math friends to come in. So I have done it both ways, where students do come in and work together, and that is very successful. And I feel like that might be a little bit more successful for homeroom teachers versus somebody like me who's on the special schedule, that kind of thing. So we do a lot where my older students will create items pretty far in advance, and then they will add them into Flip so that the younger students, when they come to me, use QR codes and our iPads to then bring up that information to learn from them.
I love that process. I think, one of the things you just mentioned probably addresses a pain point or a really genuine concern that educators might have. Like, how do you make this happen just logistically, right? So that ability to foster these connections in an asynchronous manner. Yes, you might be all together with them, but they might not be all with that other group of students, especially if they see you once a week or they're on that rotating schedule. That's fantastic. And, one of the things that you shared on social media, which grabbed my attention, was this connection to video, right? And you mentioned Microsoft Flipped already. So, tell us a little bit about this video creation process. How do you guide students in selecting what topics they're going to share, or maybe even creating scripts or planning video? What does that look like behind the scenes in your tech lab?
Yes, there is a lot of preliminary items that we go through to prepare for this. A lot of times when we do our peer learning, we do it a lot more towards the end of the school year, because I like to make sure, even though students have done it now maybe a couple of times with me, I still want to go over the basics so that I make sure that there is that procedure being followed to try to ensure that everyone is involved and that everyone's work is above standard. We do talk about that a lot. So I make sure that everyone is comfortable using Flip. So that's usually step one, is to make sure that they have used it a lot. They're comfortable with recording. Sometimes we make our videos ahead of time in a different product. So we use the Clips app, which is made by Apple. We use that often. We have also used Adobe to make our videos. So really, I use the other programs, sometimes maybe even more than the direct recording into Flip. I'll have them make it. So that way there's some standards of learning and they're not always using the same tool. I do think it's great to use the same tool over and over and to go deeper with the tool. But I also like for them, I feel like video creation is huge. And if we can teach our students how to create using their whatever device they have, the different variations of creating a video, then when they have the opportunity in the future, they will be able to create, given an iPad, given a Chromebook, whatever, a phone, whatever they have in their hands, they'll know some way to create a video if they would like to. So that is step one. I do know that some children like to write down a script. Some children can totally they don't have a need for a script. They don't want to write a script. So that's a little bit of a point of interest that you definitely need to go over that with the kids. And I kind of do a lot of examples for them and show them, like, if you're not going to use a script, that's totally fine with me. Everybody's different. But remember that when you push record, you're being recorded, or, whatever the case may be. And that, they need to explain something. There needs to be items there for the kids to learn from. It's not just silliness. So a lot of times, a lot of the topics for peer learning I'm selecting those topics, but when we are making just videos at the beginning of the year, a lot of times it is their selection and they get to choose what they would like to make their video about. So that's kind of step one. We also have some procedures when we're just making the videos of getting their peer-to-peer in the same grade level, in the same classroom, to give them some, we don't call it feedback, we actually call it for a rating. So before they turn it into me, they have to get a peer in that class with them that's also creating to give them a rating. And we use a very simple thumbs up is great work. There's nothing that needs to be done to this. A medium is there's maybe just a little bit of room for improvement. But if one student gives another student a medium, they have to tell them what they feel like an improvement could be, give them a wish. And then the last one is, you need some more added to this. So, and those are the same ratings that they give me about lessons that we do, about different apps. So we're real comfortable with those ratings. You don't take it personally. This is just about just your work. They have to get two thumbs up before they can submit it to me. So that's kind of how we go about that process. And then once they've created the informational video, then we move into how are we going to share this? And a lot of times we discuss as a group how we're going to share those, whether it's going to be Flip, whether they can come up with another way to share it with an entire class or a grade level. So.
Oh, I like that emphasis on building a community for that type of feedback, right? Just everyone knows that it's a space where they're asking for that, they're taking action on it. And even you mentioned, right, they might select topics early on, kind of that lower lift, right, to introduce some of these tools, get comfortable in that environment. So, I'm curious, Kristen, as you're thinking about what you've done with groups, whether it's this year and all the years kind of all together, what are some of the key benefits you've observed for students who participate in a peer learning experience and those that are creating videos together? What do they get out of this?
I absolutely love that. That is my number one favorite thing about peer learning, and why I continue to do it year after year is I definitely noticed when I really started having them create more video creations and just using technology to create, that when they were creating, quote unquote, just to turn it in, that there was a very low bar or standard for them personally. And even though they might turn it into me and then we have a sharing day, that it didn't matter what feedback I gave them, it really wasn't something that they were like, ooh, I'm going to go fix it. They'd be like, oh, okay, that's great, Miss Brooks.
Mhm.
But when we would have the sharing day, or they would, upload it to Flip, and then their classmates would go and look at their videos and give them feedback. Whenever a classmate gave them feedback, they were like, oh, Miss Brooks, I need to go pull that down and make an edit, and then I'm going to reload it. And I'm like, okay, that's a lot of steps. And if you would like to do that, absolutely. I love it. So I noticed that it was much more important to them what their peers thought than what I thought, which is what the whole point is anyway. And with teaching 850 kids, sometimes I do need some help with that review process, because I do tell them I will watch every single thing that they put out there, because if it's not up to school standards, then it's going to be deleted. And they're okay with that.
And I think that built-in audience that peer learning experiences provide, right? Someone's going to see this. We know who that person is. We're creating for this specific group with this reason in mind, right? You're doing what we talk about so much with establishing an audience that can feel really intimidating, right? Where am I going to find this audience for students? Well, in many situations, it's right there for them. And that peer learning really builds that into what students will think about with their purpose for creating videos. So you mentioned some of, your favorite tech tools for creating videos: Microsoft Flip, Adobe Express, Apple Clips, so many great ones out there. But if someone's listening right now and they, want to try this out, maybe they're not sure what to do first, what advice would you give to other educators who are interested in incorporating peer learning and video production into their teaching practice?
Absolutely. Thanks. I just would start small. I mean, that's 100% start small. Really think through your plan and the procedures that you're going to tell the students. Make sure that those procedures are definitely written out step by step, either on a poster somewhere. It could be a printed poster that the teacher makes. It could just be a flip chart. It could be on a learning management system. But I usually have those procedures multiple places so that they have reference items. And I definitely give them, how you're going to create it, then how you're going to put it somewhere for it to be viewed, what you expect the students to do when they view it. So we, again, go through a lot of using Microsoft Flip. And when they go in, students don't necessarily know how to leave a comment. In fact, when I first started doing this, they would always just click on the little heart that they liked it and they felt like that was a comment.
Yeah.
And then I had to go through and actually show them how to leave a comment. And we used something that I came up with. Well, first, let me step back a little bit. When we were doing peer-to-peer, we do something that I learned from my friend Tony Vincent, and it was to leave a compliment and a wish. And so whenever the kids are giving their thumbs up, medium, or thumbs down, they do that with a compliment and a wish. And so they say, like, always the compliment is first. And we go over this a lot. And then, I loved how you picked some music that really got you excited about learning this math item. And then they would say something like, but I wish that you would have spell checked your video before you, uploaded it or before you asked for feedback. And so that's part of our feedback when it's peer-to-peer, same grade level. When it is something that is already uploaded, like let's say in Microsoft Flip, and they are going to do a typed out comment, they do something along the lines of a compliment sandwich. And that is something that I came up with, but it's not a new term at all. But I said, guys, when you're telling somebody a compliment and it's a compliment sandwich, the compliments are the bread, and then the wish is in the middle, and that's the peanut butter and jelly or the meat and the cheese. And so they love that idea. So they love leaving compliment sandwiches, and they have to type those out. But it really does give the students two things that they did well, and then something that they might want to work on. And if they don't have a wish, they simply put in the middle of their compliment sandwich, I have no wishes. So.
That's such a great just framework for someone to embrace who's starting this out for the first time, who wants to incorporate feedback into a peer learning environment where maybe they're setting those expectations for the first go of it. And I love how you place that emphasis on modeling, right? We don't know what a good comment is if we haven't seen them before. Right. So that's such an important piece and a great reminder, Kristen, that I'm so happy that you mentioned. So this has been so useful for anyone who's curious about peer learning, who's thinking about new ways to bring videos into the work that they do. I'm going to link out so people can find you and follow along with all of your great work. Just like I saw your awesome tweet sharing one of your recent activities with groups of students. But where can people connect with you? Where can they learn more about your work?
Yeah, I have a few different locations. I have a link tree, so they can definitely go to that link tree. And then I also have my website, which is just KristenBrooks77.net. And then I'm on all the socials. Pretty much everything is Kristen Brooks 77. I did think of that very far in advance and happened to every time I would join a new one, that was always available. So I was very blessed with that. And I have some of those posters that are very helpful in the classroom for setting up some of those policies and procedures, just to really get your kids thinking about how to leave other comments and compliments, and just how important that is, that words, are meaningful, and that we really need to be mindful of how we say things and the way that we go about leaving those things. So, yeah.
Well, I will make sure to link out so that everyone can find you in all of those places. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise and sharing with listeners today.
You are so welcome. Thank you for having me. Such a blessing to be with you and just to get to chat with you, my friend, and just talk about education. It's so much fun.
It was so much fun chatting with Kristen today, and I hope you got plenty of ideas for peer learning and video creation that you can take into the summer and upcoming school year. So let's make this EdTech easy with a few key points from this episode. Start small. Communicate procedures step by step. Model commenting for students, and set a sharing day for students to give feedback. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode, including all of the ways to connect with Kristen Brooks at classtechtips.com/podcast and finding today's episode. A big thank you to our sponsor for this episode, Britannica Professional Learning. They're dedicated to growing and retaining exceptional educators by providing tailored, professional learning solutions that help both educators and students thrive. With a focus on activating, enhancing, and growth, Britannica Professional Learning offers customized professional development that supports teachers in building product knowledge, enhancing pedagogical expertise, and driving student growth. Elevate your teaching practices and empower your students by visiting www.britannicaeducation.com and discover how they can help you transform your classroom. Thanks for joining us for another Tuesday edition of the Easy EdTech podcast. Remember to hit follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app to have next week's episode ready for you on Tuesday morning. Feel free to share takeaways from this episode with friends or colleagues in a quick email or text, or even on social media. And don't hesitate to tag me at Class Tech Tips if you have any questions.